Shalom, shalom, shalom. Welcome to another debate here on Debate Talk for You, where we will have the brother Yarah Ben Nazr and the brother KP Barnabas together tonight, joining in a battle of wits, discussing Alexander the Great. Is he from Esau or is he from Japheth? Um, Yara says he's from Japheth. And the brother KP says he's a descendant of Esau. So we're going to battle it out. And then you guys are going to be the judge. Tell us what you like. At this moment, I'm going to bring on first, I'm going to bring on brother Elder Yara. And he can tell us a little bit about himself and anything you want to promote, my brother. You can go ahead and promote it. What's up, Yara? How you doing, sir?
Hey, what's good with you, brother Vinny? Shabbat Shalom. Man,
Shalom.
peace to brother KP, man. Appreciate you showing up for this discussion, this debate. It should be interesting. I have a twofold purpose for this debate tonight. And I'm going to get into it first, dealing with the debate topic. Does Alexander the Great descend from the lineage of Esau? Or from Japheth, which I'm going to be showing and proving that he's a descendant of Japheth. For historical purposes, number one, just to get the understanding correctly, the biblical understanding of it correctly, and also to deal with the false doctrine that Esau is the white man speaking in the biological sense. Spiritually, we can make an argument, but biologically, yeah, we won't be able to do that. But it matters, right? So for those who think that this debate is not important, it's wholly important to the rhetoric and to the understanding of who we're dealing with, especially in the now and in the end time. So it's for those who have a penchant for knowledge and understanding. You're going to get some good information from Brother KP as well as myself tonight. We're going to mix this thing up. We're giving all praises to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God our Father Yahuwah, for all the things that he has done. Let's get it in.
Hallelujah. And then go ahead and if you have any like social media platforms, I put it all in the description, on the video.
Yeah,
But if you
definitely
got,
subscribe. Yeah, definitely subscribe on YouTube to Elder Yara. Also, the Israelite Intelligentsia podcast. Like, share, and subscribe. You get some good information on there as well. We get into some very unorthodox discussions on certain topics, some things you don't necessarily hear or hear discussed among the body of Israel, but very poignant subjects. If you have a penance for wisdom and knowledge and understanding. So, again, Elder Yara on YouTube or Israelite Intelligentsia podcast. Tanks on the ground, man. Shout out to my Yahweh War Machine brothers. Tanks on the ground.
all right. Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Now let's get on to the brother KP. KP, all right. How you doing, my man? Shabbat
I'm
shalom.
good, brother. I'm good. Shabbat shalom, you brothers.
Oh,
Yeah, my name is KP Barnabas. Also go by the name of Shofar, which in Hebrew means trumpet. That's exactly who I am. I'm a trumpet of truth, a defender of the faith. Pretty much don't have as much to say as Brother Yarah did with his intro, but I'm just here to discuss and dialogue concerning the historical connection that Alexander has to Japheth and Esau. And that's pretty much it. I'm just ready to get into it whenever you brothers are ready.
okay. And you don't want to plug any social media platforms for yourself?
No, I'm not really. All I have is the Facebook page, but I do have my philanthropic page, houseoftobit.com. The website's still pretty much under construction, but I'll just put that out there. That's an organization that I run, a not-for-profit organization that we feed the homeless, do coat drives, food drives in the tri-state area. And that's pretty much it. It's houseoftobit.com. Any correspondence can be houseoftobit@gmail.com.
Okay, that's what's up. So with that being said, you guys go support both these brothers' pages, especially if you like what they hear tonight. Make sure you get your pens and your pads ready because it is about to go down. Debate Talk for You is back on the air with another great debate for you people to hear. Okay, so at this moment, it's my understanding that the brother KP is going to go first. So let me set up your time here, and then we're going to go ahead and get you going. Go ahead and get you going. With that being said, if anybody would like to, participate in any kind of debate, just hit the brother Sal up, and we will definitely get you in there. Okay, let's see here. So let me go ahead and set my timer. Um, Set my timer for 15 minutes. First round is 15 minutes. And let's see. All right, 15 minutes. Elder Yara, I'm going to put you in the back and then let the brother KP go ahead. And brother KP, as soon as you start, I'm going to start your time. And then I am going to remove myself. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself, brother, and start whenever you're ready.
All right, brother. Thanks once again. Shalom. I'd like to thank Debate Talk for You for the opportunity to have this dialogue on your platform. First of all, again, my name is KP Barnabas. My walk in this truth began about 30 years ago, so I've become very familiar with a lot of diverse arguments. And brother Yara's premise is that Alexander was a descendant of Japheth by way of Japheth's son Javan, and he has referenced the scriptural mention of Alexander as the king of Javan as part of his evidence. And this is an entirely incorrect school of thought. I just want to point out a similar type of reasoning by using the example of the people that today call themselves Ashkenazi Jews. The man Ashkenaz was also a descendant of Japheth, as Javan was. And the children of Ashkenaz settled the region of Europe that's today known as Germany. But in medieval times, the region itself was called Ashkenaz. And as most of us know, we should know, in the 8th century, the entire Khazarian Empire in the Caucasus converted to Torah lifestyle, and they made Judaism their state religion. So they became Jews by practice. And after the fall of Khazaria, several centuries later, many of them migrated into northern Europe, mainly into the Ashkenaz region, and they came to be called Ashkenazi or Ashkenazim Jews. Now, they weren't Jews, technically, they weren't Jews, neither were they Ashkenazi. They were Jews by practice, not ethnicity. And they were Ashkenazi or German, not because they were ethnically descended from Ashkenaz, but because they became citizens of the region known as Ashkenaz. So now many people assume that because these people are known as Ashkenazi Jews, that they're descendants of Japheth, by way of Ashkenaz. But that's a result of lazy scholarship. And it's a result of settling for branch knowledge, as opposed to getting off the surface and dealing with root knowledge. So this is the case with the erroneous idea that just because Alexander sprang from Greek or Japhetic territories, or just because he was referred to as the king of Javan in prophecy, that he was ethnically Japhetic. Alexander's Greek name was Alexandros Macedon. And that surname Macedon identifies him as a Macedonian. The land of Macedonia was never a region of Greece. Macedonians were neighbors geographically. The Greeks, or the indigenous descendants of Japheth, treated the Macedonians as foreigners, barbarians. The Macedonians and the Greeks were not the same people And they themselves never considered each other kinsmen, which I'm going to, without a shadow of a doubt, proceed, as well as prove that the Macedonians were in fact the descendants of Esau, specifically Alexander and his father, Philip. Now, I want the listening audience to consider a couple of things about Alexander's people, the Macedonians. Out of all the versions of Macedonian origins that's told by various Greek and Roman historians, the one common denominator is the fact that they descended from a man named Temenus or Temanus. The Macedonians call themselves Temenidae, and the Macedonian Argaea dynasty was also known as Temenid dynasty, the Temenid dynasty. And the suffix of IDAE that's in the word Temenidae and the suffix of ID that's in the word Temenid means descended from or related to. So by calling themselves Temenidae or Temenid, they were claiming that they are descendants of a man named Temen or Temenus. And this fact will become more relevant to the true ethnicity of Alexander as the dialogue progresses. But for now, the Macedonians began their migration into Greece about 3,000 years ago. And the people that they encountered in Greece did not recognize them by any means. The indigenous Greeks called the Macedonians barbarians, which in ancient times it meant a people who were not Greek or people who didn't speak the Greek language, basically foreigners who were inferior to them. In fact, Herodotus, the Greek historian and philosopher, he gave an example in his Histories book series, specifically book 5, of a 5th century BC Macedonian king that wanted to participate in the Olympic Games. But the indigenous Greeks protested, and they said that the contest should be only for Greeks and not foreigners. So why did these Japhetic people consider Alexander the Great's Macedonian forefather as a non-Greek foreigner? And then about 100 years after this Olympic incident that Herodotus mentioned, Alexander's father, Philip, rose to power after he defeated the Greeks and established Macedonian rulership over the majority of southern Greece in the Battle of Chaeronea. And Philip's victory was considered historically the end of Greek history and the beginning of the Macedonian era, which is why we read in scripture, Alexander's reign was called the first over Greece. The first over Greece. Now, if he was ethnically Greek, how could he have been the first over Greece? He was the first foreign ruler of Greece. And not only that, there was a Greek statesman that was contemporary with Philip in the 4th century BC, contemporary with Alexander's father, Philip. His name was Demosthenes. And he wrote a series of books about Alexander's father, Philip, that were called the Philippic Orations. And in book 3, this is what Demosthenes said about Philip. He said, Philip is not only no Greek, nor related to the Greeks, but a pestilent knave from Macedonia. Now, let me read it again. He was not only Greek. This is talking about Alexander's father now. He was not only no Greek, nor related to the Greeks, but a pestilent knave from Macedonia. So if Philip was identified as not even being related to the Japhetic people, how would Alexander, his son, then be related to the Japhetic people? One more interesting point to consider is from the ancient Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, who wrote a biography of Alexander the Great. And in his book, he wrote about an incident when Alexander was wounded in battle, and the people weren't sure whether or not he was going to die. So when the Greeks found out about it, the indigenous Greeks found out about it, they began to rise up and rebel against the Macedonians. Now, listen closely to what Diodorus wrote concerning this situation. I'm going to quote, I quote, "For many days, the king," talking about Alexander, "lay helpless under his treatment. And the Greeks, who had been settled in Bactria and Sogdiana, who had long borne unhappily their sojourn among peoples of another race, and now received word that the king had died of his wounds, revolted against the Macedonians." So again, the Greeks, or the sons of Japheth, referred to Alexander and the Macedonians as people of another race. So it's evident, and it's obvious that the Macedonians were not ethnically related to the Greeks. Neither did they share common ancestry with these Japhetic people. So the nature of Alexander's connection to the Greeks, the same Greeks that he subdued and colonized, was purely nominal or in a theoretical sense, simply because the Macedonians were not ethnically Greek or Hellene or Japhetic. And there's absolutely no records that definitively proves otherwise. So as I'm going to yield my time, but I urge the listeners to pay close attention to Brother Yarah's sources in reference to his argument concerning Alexander's ethnic background, and ask yourself, is he using surface level branch knowledge, or is he applying root knowledge? Just look closely, pay attention to his sources and whatever he presents in reference to Alexander's ethnic background, and keep that thought in mind. Is it branch knowledge? Is it surface knowledge, nominal, theoretical knowledge, or is he applying root knowledge? So I yield my time. Brother Vinny?
Oh, my bad. I wasn't on the screen. I'm sitting over there talking to myself. But anyway, yeah, that was a powerful round coming from the brother KP. Lot of information there, a lot of information. I can't wait to the rebuttal rounds and also the cross examinations. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this on over to Elder Yara. Elder Yara, it is on you. Hold on one second. Let me set up your time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, let me go ahead and get that up, and then I'll yeah, you go ahead and let me see here. Oh, present. Yeah, let me see. Go ahead and did you try to share it yet? It's just making noises. Let's see.
Now.
Okay, there you go.
See it?
Add it to the stream. Yep. It's up there. It looks like it's up there. Okay, brother. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bow out, and I'm gonna as soon as you start talking, then that's when I'm gonna start your time. Like I said, you got 15 minutes, opening round, and you begin whenever you're ready, and I'll begin your time.
All right, I'm ready, brother. Again, appreciate you, brother Vinny, for hosting this show tonight. Again, shout out to KP, man, with a decent opening introduction. And again, last but not least, man, shout out to SHOUTOUT, man, for the venue, for the platform, Debate Talk for You, and the staple in our community, man. So we really appreciate you, Sal. Please donate to Debate Talk for You. But let's get it in. Does the ancestral origins of Alexander the Great descend from the biblical lineage of Esau? Our brother KP put out a lot of information, put out a lot of things. He tried to smear it around, but we're going to get into it. He talked about whether or not I'm going to be dealing with branch knowledge and surface knowledge and root knowledge. But let's really see how far this brother got, how really deep he got. So let's deal with it, right? First of all, I'm going to deal with something right off the bat, right? Destroying the myth that Zepho is the progenitor of Rome. You would think if Idumeans and Romans were the same, they would have origin stories, languages, and contact suggesting such. There is no hint of Edom in ancient Roman stories, and likewise with Roman Edom. Latin is descended from Proto-Indo-European, while Edomites spoke a Canaanite language in the Afro-Asiatic family. Clear contrast and distinction, family. The mythology of the Edomites' religion more closely resembles that of the Levant, such as Moab and Israel, that of Europe, while Roman mythology more closely resembles that of Greece and the Etruscans. In contrast, the Carthaginian Empire in Northern Africa started out from colonists from Phoenicia, Canaan land. This is known by their shared customs, similar to languages and written accounts between members of both communities, interaction with each other, with Phoenicia clearly taking the role of the mother country to colonists around the Mediterranean. No such interaction can be found between Romans and Idumeans, right? So let's just deal with that right off the bat, right? Destroying the myth that Zepho is the progenitor of Rome, because you're going to hear that tonight. I guarantee it. According to the Bible, note Zepho is an Edomite. Also explains why Edomites have Canaanite genetics, right? They're Edomites at the end of the day. Genesis 36, 1 through 2, verses 5 and 6, verses 8, verses 11 goes as this. Now, these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan, and Halibama bare Yeosh and Yalam and Korah. These are the sons of Esau, which were born unto him in the land of Canaan. And Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters and all the persons of his house and his cattle and all his beasts and all his substance, which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman. The brother brought up Teman. We're going to deal with that, right? He tried to connect Alexander the Great and the Greeks to Teman. But let's deal with that. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatma, and Kenaz, right? Brother already talked about the Ashkenazi Jews. He already talked about that, but we're going to deal with that as well, right? Let me show this really quickly, right? Let's deal with this. Genesis chapter 10, verses 1 through 5, right? Now, these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them were the sons born after the flood. And the sons of Japheth, Gomer, and Magog, and Madi, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshach, and Tyrus. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz. We just talked about Ashkenaz, right? Clearly, the scripture talks about these are the descendants of Jacob, right? And Riphath and Togarmah. And the sons of Javan, Elisha and Tarshish, Kittim and Dodami. Now, this is what we have to understand. When we get to the point of dealing with Kittim or Kittim, or sometimes you see it Chittim, we understand that that is the land that we knew in ancient times to be Italy or Rome, right? Let's keep that in mind. And Dodanium, right? We see that's a lineage of Javan, not Esau. Let's deal with it. By these were the isles of the Gentiles, divided in their land, one after his tongue, after their families in their nations. Understand that. Genesis 10, 1 through 5 is our proof text, is our foundational scripture for this particular topic, right? Let's deal with it, right? Javan, the fourth son of Japheth, Genesis chapter 10, verse 2, whose descendant settled in Greece or Ionia, which bears the name of Javan in Hebrew. Alexander the Great is called the king of Javan, rendered Grecia in Daniel chapter 8, verse 21, Daniel chapter 10 and 20. Compare that with Daniel chapter 11 and 2, Zechariah 9 and 13. This word was universally used by the nations of the East as the generic name of the Greek race. This is written in stone. This is history, right? There's no argument against that, right? Javan is also found in apocalyptic literature in the book of Daniel, as I mentioned before, chapters 8, 21 through 22, and 11 and 2, in reference to the king of Greece, most commonly interpreted as a reference to Alexander the Great, right? We're talking about the descendants of Javan, right? Let's deal with it, right? The Ancient History of the Egyptians and Carthaginians by Charles Rowland, page 151, right? In order to arrive at a certainty with respect to the first origin of the Grecian nations, we must necessarily have recourse to the accounts we have of it in Holy Scripture, Javan or Iona, or the Ionians. For in the Hebrew, the same letters differently pointed from those two different names, the son of Japheth and grandson of Noah, was certainly the father of all those nations that went under the general denomination of Greeks, though he has been looked upon as the father of the Ionians only, which are but one particular nation of Greeks. But the Hebrews, the Chaldeans, Arabians, and others give no other affiliation to the whole body of the Grecian nation than that of the Ionians. And for this reason, Alexander, speaking of Alexander the Great, in the predictions of Daniel, is mentioned under the name of the king of Javan. This is what the scripture understands who his descendants, who his Alexander the Great ancestors are. This is who we have recorded in history. But we're going to get into it tonight, and we're going to show you where this mythos, this mythology comes from that equates Esau even to Rome or to the Greeks. We're going to show you where this is a complete myth, right? We're going to deal with that. Again, from the Ancient History of Egyptians and Carthaginians by Charles Rowland, in the same book in page 2. These four kings are the four horns of the he-goat in the prophecy of Daniel, which came up in the place of the first horn that was broken. The first horn was Alexander, king of Greece, who destroyed the empire of the Medes and Persians, designated by the ram with two horns, right? Let's continue. According to the book Alexander the Great by Louis Vance Cumming, page 187, Alexander then, recalling the refusal of the high priest of Jerusalem to render assistance during the siege of Tyre, next turned down that city, a bare 3 days' march distant. As the army neared the people of the city were panic-stricken, but acting on the advice of the high priest, the citizens, with the priest at their head, met the king outside of the city gates. Alexander was so impressed at the meeting, especially when shown one of the ancient prophecies, that a Greek, literally a man from Javan, i.e. Ionia, would at last come and free the people from the Persian rule. This prophecy he read to mean himself. He therefore permitted the people of the country to live on under their own laws and systems. Josephus says that he then made a short excursion northward into Samaria, where he conscripted several thousands of the inhabitants and took them with him. Upon his arrival in Egypt, continues Josephus, he sent the Samaritans to the garrison to the upper Nile post of the Elephantine. He then turned back to Gaza and prepared to march on to Egypt. The time was November. He spent the whole year in the sieges of the two cities, and that was but a tenth of the time he had left in the region upon this earth. So clearly, this is in the Histories of Macedonia.com, Alexander the King of Javan, if you really want to go to the actual source, or you can go to the book by Vance Cummings that clearly equates Alexander the Great as a Greek. Let's continue. The book of Daniel, page 90 by Raymond Hammer, is also clear about the meaning of Javan, right? You got to understand, KP just argued against this connection from Alexander the Great and Javan. But let's continue. The Hebrew word for Greece, Javan, is derived from the Greek word Ionia. The Ionian Greeks lived mainly in Asia Minor. It was through them that Assyria, Persia, and Egypt first came in touch with Greek culture and trade. The first king. The reference here is to Alexander the Great, king of Macedon, from 336 BCE to 323 BCE. He was to die without an heir who could succeed him, right? He married the daughter of Darius III, the last of the Persian kings, but in his death, he left only an infant son. So the understanding, the reason why Alexander the Great was called the first king is not because he was the actual first king of the Greek people or any Greek people, because of the spread of the culture through Alexander the Great, and Hellenism was because of the conquering of Alexander the Great. So naming him the first king gives him the title, the epitome of being the king to spread the Greek culture throughout the known world at the time. Let's also get this from the book of the empires of the Bible, From the Confusion of Tongues to the Babylonian Captivity by Alonzo Trevor Jones in pages 415. We can find her. Brother KP Barnabas said, pay close attention to my sources. See if they're surface level sources or branch root sources. Let's deal with it. From Javan came the Greeks, For in the Hebrew, Daniel 8:21 reads, King of Javan, 10-20, Prince of Javan, 11-2, Realm of Javan, instead of king, prince, and realm of Greece or Greece. The Revised Version gives Javan in the margin of each of these places. Everyone in antiquity, every historian, every credible historian equates Alexander the Great with being the king of Javan and of the Greeks. And Javan and the Greeks deriving from Javan, what we see in Genesis chapter 10, verses 1-5. Let's continue. Malachi Hamakonian 2019, right? Jacob and Esau, Jewish European historian between nations and empire, Cambridge and Cambridge University Press. We're going to get into it. Jacob and Esau, and Jewish European historian between nations and empire. We're going to get into this much more as we go on in this debate. Clearly, my opponent has only given you the surface level information. Some based on false doctrine, a lot of it, all of it entirely based on mythos. But I'm going to give you the breakdown. I'm going to give you the truth. I'm going to show you the lineage. I'm going to show you the connections in the culture. I'm going to show you where this mythos came from. That Alexander the Great or the Greeks or even the Romans had anything biologically to do, when we talk about lineage, biologically, ethnically, right, genotypically, if they had anything to do with Esau, it's a complete myth. And we're going to get into this tonight. And with that, I'll yield.
Ooh, that was another powerful debate, another powerful opening round. Both the brothers had great opening rounds, man. I don't know, man. This is getting good, man. This is getting real good. Y'all make sure y'all hit that like button, subscribe and share it, so a lot of people can get this information. I don't know, man. I got this as a stalemate so far, man. Both brothers put up some great information. It's going to be really interesting seeing what's going to happen during this rebuttal round. So this is the first of two rebuttal rounds that the brothers will have apiece. It's going to be 8 minutes apiece. Let me go ahead and bring the brother KP back in. So this is going to be an 8-minute round to rebut anything that you've heard Elder Yara say. And you can go ahead and come on off mute, brother KP. And then I'm going to go ahead and set this up for 2 minutes, this timer. Let's go ahead and set it for 8 minutes here. Okay, got it all set. Okay, brother, and if you'd like me to share your screen or anything, just holler at me and I'll do it for you. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. I'm going to remove myself. As soon as I remove myself and you begin talking, then I'm going to go ahead and start your time, brother. Go ahead.
All right. This is what I meant earlier by branch of surface knowledge as opposed to root knowledge. Again, the brother is harping on the fact that the scriptures or historians or whatever references that he sourced is connecting Alexander to Javan. But I want to point a couple of things out, using the scripture and using common sense as well. When our father Jacob was called an Aramaean in the Bible, did that mean he was ethnically an Aramaean? Of course not. He was a citizen of the land of Aram, but he was ethnically Hebrew. Herod was called King of the Jews, but he wasn't a Jew. He assumed the lifestyle of a Jew by way of conversion, and he had authority over the Jews in Judea, but he wasn't a Jew just because he was called that. Again, another example in scripture, when we're talking about kings, we talk about Alexander being called the king of Javan. The scriptures say that Shishak was the king of Mitzrayim. But if you check in history and check the background of Shishak, you'll see that he was not a descendant of Mizraim. Shishak was a foreigner that became the king of the Egyptians. So the same goes for Alexander. Being king of Javan and a descendant of Javan are two entirely different things. As I mentioned in my intro, and I only gave maybe 3 or 4 sources, but there are a plethora of sources that point to the fact that the people of Greece themselves, the indigenous people of Greece that encountered the Macedonians, did not view the Macedonians, who are Alexander's people, as kinsmen. They themselves did not view them as kinsmen. They called them barbarians, foreigners, or people of another race. And what the brother Yara is doing, he's hanging his hat on the adopted names that the Macedonians took on upon migrating into the land of the indigenous people of Greece. The adopted identities that they took on. For example, why, you have to ask the question, why were the Macedonians known as an Argaid dynasty, or known as Argives? Was it because they shared a common ancestry with the Black Mycenaeans of the Argos region in Greece? No. Because according to the Greek historian Appian, in his book, The Syrian Wars, specifically on page 63, he stated this: there's an Argos in Peloponnese, which is the area where the Macedonians migrated to when they came out of Macedonia. That's central Greece. There's an Argos in Peloponnese, another in Amphilochia, another in Oresteia, whence comes the Macedonian Argadae, and the one on the Ionian Sea. So what Appian said in his book, he mentions Oresteia, that's a region in Macedonia. So according to Appian, Macedonia also had a city called Argos. And this is where the Macedonian dynasty Argadae comes from, not the one that's in Greece. They came from Argos in Macedonia, swept down into central Greece, and they were known as the Argives, or known as Argaid. But what Brother Yara would have you believe is that because Argaid is connected to the name of the Macedonians, they must be ethnically Japhetic. That's incorrect. That's very lazy scholarship. And furthermore, there's another historian named Thucydides. And in his book titled The History of the Peloponnesian War, he states that the Argeads, talking about the Macedonians, the Argeads established their kingdom through conquest and expelled the native inhabitants. So if Alexander, or Alexander's people, I should say, the Macedonians, are the same Argives, the same Argead people as the people that were in central Greece, why were they called natives? Why were the Argives that they conquered called natives? If they're natives, then what would that make the Macedonians? Foreigners. The elder Yara might also mention the Dorians, how the Macedonians were also named Dorians. Why were they named Dorians? Was it because they were the same people as the Greeks who inhabited the district of Doris in central Greece? No. The inhabitants of Doris, they spoke an entirely different dialect than that of the Macedonians. When the Macedonians had to speak to them, they used a translator. And it's bizarre how Brother Yara, he had just said that the reason why Alexander was called the first over Greece was because he spread Greek culture. His culture was not Greek culture. The Macedonian culture was not Greek culture. They didn't even speak the same language. When they came into the region, they introduced iron. They introduced horses. They even introduced pederasty. They came in there and they introduced man-boy love. It was not the same culture. So I have no idea where Brother Yara is getting that from. That the reason why the reason why Alexander was called the first of Greece was because he instituted Hellenism, or the spread of Greek culture. That's incorrect. They did not have the same culture. The whole culture was distinct. They spoke a different language. They looked at each other as foreigners, barbarians. They didn't even let them include them in the Olympics, because the Olympic Games was for Greeks. If they were Greeks, why were they not included? These are common sense questions that we have to ask ourselves if we're going to really dig deep and go into the connection, the true connection between Alexander and the Greeks. Javan is a nominal title. Theoretical. He was not a descendant of Japheth because he was called the king of Japheth. If we're going to say that, then we have to say that Herod was a Jew because he was called king of the Jews. If we're going to say that, then we have to say that Shishak was an Egyptian because he was called the king of Mitzrayim in the scriptures. So this is the surface level information I'm talking about. We have to go deeper than that. A lot of these historians or these internet sources that Brother Yara brought up, or these books he brought up, they're talking about Javan mainly in terms of the actual descendants of Javan. But these Macedonians that came into the region and colonized and conquered the indigenous people are not the same as the indigenous people. So that's the rebuttal I have. He didn't really have much to rebut. He was kind of going in circles with the information he was bringing out. But as far as Zepho goes, he mentioned Zepho. That has nothing to do with this conversation. I don't really regard Zepho as anything that had to do with this concerning Alexander and his ethnic identity. So I don't know how much time I have with the 8 minutes, but that's pretty much it. I'm going to yield before, I guess, the next rebuttal. I'm going to go into Alexander's true identity, which is that of Esau. So I yield my time at this time.
Man, that was perfect. Yeah, another great round. Another great round. Elder Yara, you got a screen you want me to share?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead and put it up and then I'll bring it in. Yeah, man, you guys, we got a debate on our hands, guys. I hope you guys got your notebooks ready. I know I'm taking my notes down. A lot of information being brought out. Okay, let me go ahead and add your stream to the stream. Okay, looks like it's golden.
Ready?
And like I said, you brother, you got 8 minutes, and then we're gonna have another rebuttal round after this. So can't wait to hear it. So I'm gonna remove myself, and as soon as I remove myself, you begin talking, and I'll start your time, brother.
All right. All right, let's hit it. All right, let's deal with this, man. He keeps bringing up the fact that Alexander the Great wasn't allowed to participate in the Greek Olympics, so therefore he was determined not to be a Greek. This is wholly false by all historian accounts, right? So Macedonian Greeks, let's deal with it. Historian Mary Bird notes that members of Alexander the Great's family took part in the Olympic Games, which some argue is proof of his Greekness. However, there was, Beard notes, originally some dispute at the time about whether they were or were not Greek enough. Greek enough, not that they weren't Greeks, but Greek enough to qualify. Even though he was a Macedonian king, Alexander the First was finally allowed to participate in the Olympic Games based what? On his roots in the Greek Argive dynasty. As the Olympic example shows, the national identity of Alexander the Great and his ancestors was complicated even during this time. And this is why my brother is failing to understand and get to the actual root origin of Alexander the Great's ancestry. Right? He's missing it. And he's been harping on this all night. Okay, why was he allowed to participate in the Olympic Games? He was. This is what I mean about you just reading blurbs, brother, and not going and actually reading the source material, right? So Alexander the Great was allowed to participate in the Olympic Games based on his roots in the Greek Argive dynasty. As the Olympic example shows, the national identity of Alexander the Great and his ancestors was complicated even during this time. Historians and residents of modern Greece will likely continue to debate the question for as long as the name Macedonia is contended between the two countries. Perhaps the best answer is that he was both a man born in ancient Macedonia, the son of a Macedonian king of Greek descent, educated by the esteemed Greek philosopher Aristotle, who went on to spread ancient Greek culture and life throughout a world that has since changed dramatically. Here's the source, NewYorkBooks.com, article 10/27/2011, Alexander, how great, right? Let's continue. The Macedonians proved they were Greeks by participating at the Olympic Games, a privilege reserved only for Greeks, KP. We know that Philip II participated in the Olympics, and one could say that he bullied his way in, but the Macedonians had already been in the Olympics for generations. Only Greeks or descendants of Greeks could participate in the Olympics, and the Macedonians had already a long-standing history of generations of participating in the Greek Olympics because they were Greeks, brother. Some of the mainland Greeks protested this, and so remember, brother KP, when you said, why did these central Greeks, these Greeks that lived in the central area of Greece, why did they protest? Because the Macedonians didn't live in the central areas. They lived on further outskirts. They weren't from the central area where the more classical Greeks, the more refined Greeks came from. This is why they were called barbarians, because they were looked at as being less educated and less refined. So some of the mainland Greeks protested this and petitioned to remove the Macedonians, not because they weren't Greeks ethnically, but because they were more uncouth. They were less refined. The official judges of the Olympics, the Heladikia, right, which was the ruling body of the Olympics, reviewed the evidence and ruled the Macedonians to be Greeks. The Hellenica were renowned for their fairness, and Macedonia at this time was a small and uninfluential region, unable to have the power to sway anyone in mainland Greece, let alone the Hellenica. So in other words, they didn't even have the political power to bully their way into the Olympics. So the only way that they could participate is if there was an investigation of their ancestral history confirmed, and then they were allowed to participate as Greeks. NewYorkBooks.com article 10/27/2011, Alexander, how great. Let's continue. How much time do I got left? Let me see here. I got a few minutes. According to the Alexander the Great, according to Arian, right? Book 2:14, section 4, Alexander said this himself in a letter to the Persian king Darius. Alexander sent a reply to Darius by way of Thesapius, who went back with the Persian envoys. Alexander letter states as follows: your ancestors invaded Macedonia and the rest of Greece, inflicting evil upon us without provocation. Here, Alexander's point seems clear. Macedonia was historically a part of Greece. Here's the source, MacedoniaEvidence.org. Let's continue. Was Alexander, and here's his ethnic understanding. We're going to get more to this. Was Alexander the Great an Illyrian? What's an Illyrian? I'm going to show you that an Illyrian was a tribe of Macedonia. And I'm going to show you that Illyria was also another term or derived from the tribe of Japheth. And I'm going to prove that, right? In mighty signs and wonders by the power of the Spirit of God, so that from Jerusalem and round about to Illyricum, or Albania today, I have fully preached the gospel of Christ. This is Paul where? Preaching to the Romans, still dealing with the people of Illyria. So we see that Illyria or the Illyricum was still a prominent place in Rome. The Apostle Paul, a Jewish scholar under his Pharisee teacher Gamaliel, who was also leading the authority of Sanhedrin in the 1st century AD, preached the gospel of Jerusalem, good news, from Jerusalem to Illyricum, which is Albania today. Let's deal with it. The Illyrian kingdom of Badarius became a formidable local power in the 4th century BC. In 358 BC, however, Macedonia's Philip II, father of Alexander the Great, defeated the Illyrians and assumed control of their territory as far as Lake Orchard. Alexander himself routed the forces of Illyrian chieftain Clitus, 335 BCE, and Illyrian tribal leaders and soldiers accompanied Alexander on his conquest of Persia. After Alexander's death in 323 BC, independent Illyrian kingdoms again rose. In 312 BCE, King Glass expelled the Greeks from Duris. Why? what's going on here, right? What you see tribal chieftain wars. All of these peoples, the Greeks, the Macedonians, the Illyrians, the Peloponnesians, all of these people are descended from the same people, but there are tribal wars that are occurring here. You have to understand that's what's occurring here in history. By the end of the 3rd century, an Illyrian kingdom based near what is now Albania, city of Skota, controlled parts of northern Albania, Montenegro, Slovenia. Under Queen Julia, Illyrians attacked Roman merchant vessels plying the Adriatic Sea and gave Rome an excuse to invade the Balkans, Albania, the ancient Illyrians. Let me see how much time I got left. I think I got a minute left. Again, was Alexander the Great an Illyrian? Oh, yeah, I can end here.
You can finish your point out if you like.
Oh, I can? Okay. Let me bring it back up really quickly. Just want to get into this. Because it's leading to some. Meshach, son of Japheth, the eldest son of Noah, right? Moses 8 and 12. See also Genesis chapter 5, 32, 16, 7, 13, 9 and 18, and 23. Japheth's descendants were dispersed over the European coast of the Mediterranean and the districts adjoining the Black and Caspian Sea. Now, remember, my brother said earlier, he's not really getting into the biblical understanding of Esau and Jacob. Well, how else do you understand Esau? How else are you going to understand Japheth, if not from the biblical perspective and following their lineages?
Okay, time. All right, man. It's on fire. It's on fire, guys. It's on fire. I hope everybody got their notes. Hope everybody got their pens and their pads ready. Because man, this is a lot of information being brought out, man. Both brothers is bringing it, and I don't even know who to vote for right now. I personally, I think it's pretty almost dead even, you know. Anyway, with that being said, you guys make sure to like and subscribe, like, share, and subscribe. Support the Brother Sal's platform. You know, we bringing it back in for the new year and everything else, man. But yeah, Shabbat Shalom to everybody that celebrates. Let's go ahead and bring the Brother KP back in. And Brother KP, this is going to be your last 8-minute rebuttal round. Last 8-minute rebuttal round. And next, Elder Yara is going to have his last minute rebuttal round. And we'll go from there. So I'm going to remove myself, Brother KP. As soon as I remove myself and you begin talking, I'm going to start your time.
Okay. Yeah. Once again, the Elder Yara, first he mentioned that I said I'm not interested in the biblical perspective concerning ethnic backgrounds. I didn't say that. I was talking about Zepho, which he mentioned at the outset, which has absolutely nothing to do with Alexander and his background. So I didn't say that. And secondly, Alexander the Great had nothing to do with the Olympics. The Olympic Games, where the Macedonian was initially banned from participating in, had to do with Alexander the First, not Alexander the Great. Alexander the First was Alexander the Great's forefather. And as we should all know, the ancient Greeks divided themselves into 4 tribes based on the tradition that they were descendants of a man named Hellen. And the Hellenic tribes were the Aeolians, the Ionians, the Achaeans, and the Dorians. These were the Hellenic tribes. These were the tribes that were descendants of Japheth that were considered indigenous Greeks. Now, there's a term that these Hellenic people used called Phil-Hellene. Phil-Hellene, P-H-I-L, Hellene. And the root word phil is a Greek verb meaning to love. So Phil-Hellene meant a lover or friend of Greek people. And this is a title that the Hellenic people only gave out to foreigners or non-Greeks. Anybody listening can look this up. They only gave out the title Phil-Hellene to non-Hellenic people, foreigners or non-Greeks, who did favors for Greece. Now, Alexander's forefather, Alexander the First, the one that was not allowed to initially allowed to participate in the Olympic Games, he was called the Phil-Hellene. Put it in any of your search engines, Alexander the First, it will say Alexander the First, the Phil-Hellene. Why did they call this Macedonian a Phil-Hellene? Why did these Hellenic people, these descendants of Japheth, refer to Alexander the First as a Phil-Hellene? Because he was not Hellene. He was not Hellenic. He was not a descendant of Javan or any of the tribes of Japheth, which means that his grandson Philip was not a descendant of Javan, which means that Alexander was not a descendant of Javan. But let me get into, I'm not going to stop dealing with the what ifs and the maybes. Let's look at who were the Macedonians. Let's just get into who were the Macedonians. When we're talking about antiquity, no matter where people migrate to from their homelands, we can always get an idea of who they are by looking at the names that circulate among the people and the names they ascribe to the lands that they settle. This is a historical fact. Now, in this 19th century dictionary titled A Classical Dictionary by a man named Lempriere, the definition of Idumea, which is a Greek form of Edom, it says this in the dictionary. It says, at first, Esau or Edom, from whom it received its name, and its descendants settled along the mountains of Seir on the east and south of the Dead Sea, from whence they spread themselves by degrees through the west part of Arabia Petraea, from that sea quite to the Mediterranean. So the Edomites migrated west by degrees, meaning little by little, to Mediterranean regions, and they ended up in places like Macedonia, calling themselves by various tribal names. Now, I'm going to ask a couple of questions here for the listening audience. Is it a coincidence that in Macedonia, there's a town called Idomene, which sounds exactly like the Greek rendering Idumea? Is it a coincidence that there was a Macedonian king during the famous Trojan War, whose name was Idomeneus? Now, if you think these obvious phonetical connections to Edom are just coincidences, I want to remind everyone of what I mentioned earlier about the Macedonians calling themselves Timenidae, which Elder Yara mentioned as well. Timenidae, which is a word meaning that they are descendants of Teman. Now, what's interesting about this is that about 1,000 years ago, there was a Persian scholar and historian named al-Biruni, who had access to Alexander's genealogy, and he recorded it in a book. And he stated that what he recorded was stated by the most celebrated genealogists. So this pedigree of Alexander was common among genealogists of antiquity. The info of this book can be found in a book called The Chronology of Ancient Nations, on page 48 and 49 to be specific. Now, al-Biruni in this book began at Alexander's father Philip and traced the genealogy all the way back to Abraham, who we all know is a Shemite. So this already eliminates the idea that Alexander was Japhetic. But there's more. From Abraham, Alexander's pedigree is Isaac and Esau. Now, when we read the Edomite genealogy, which I believe Brother Yara brought out earlier, in Genesis 36, we see that Eliphaz had a son named Teman. So is this also a coincidence that these Macedonians' genealogy is traced back to an Edomite who had a son named Teman, and they also consider themselves Temanids or Temenidae, which means descendants of Teman? So, and furthermore, whether or not any of you subscribe to the rest of Esther in the Apocrypha, because some people don't subscribe to that. Some people believe it's spurious. But in the rest of Esther in the Apocrypha, Haman, who's identified as a descendant of the same Eliphaz that Alexander was descended from, is also identified as a Macedonian in the rest of Esther 16, verse 10. So these are not coincidences. And those of us that are actually familiar with scripture and prophecy, we don't find it strange that the Macedonians who became known as Greeks, they were not ethnic Greeks, they became known as Greeks, and Argiads and Argives and Dorians, they are in fact ethnically Edomites. And I guarantee that the brother Yara has no genealogical record, genealogical list of Alexander that shows that he is an actual descendant of Javan. If you look at any of these spurious genealogies out here on the internet and these books, there's always some kind of false Greek god included in Alexander the Great's genealogy, which is false. We're not talking about comic books here. This genealogy that I just mentioned that's been around for 1,000 years is undisputed. It was undisputed in ancient times, and it's undisputed today. And that genealogy list goes all the way back to Esau, to his son Eliphaz. And strangely enough, Eliphaz had a son named Teman. And strangely enough, these people that call themselves the Macedonians also call themselves descendants of Teman. So there's really not, I don't really, everything else, everything that Brother Yara is dealing with is really just nominal and theoretical, which I've said from the beginning. There's nothing going deep into showing how this man is ethnically related. Yes, geographically, he's connected to the Greeks, geographically. Culturally, he might be connected to the Greeks, but in no wise ethnically. I yield.
Okay, man. Another powerful round, man. That makes man, both these brothers is doing a great job, man. It's a lot to consider. It's a lot that I have to go back and study myself. I didn't know a lot of this information. So yeah, just make sure you guys go ahead and support both these brothers. Make sure you check out the description box, follow their links that I'm posting up on in the chat. Also, if you'd like to present information, you can also email Sal. I put it in the description box. Also, there will be a ticker on the bottom as well. Let's go ahead and bring it back to Brother Elder Yara. Elder Yara, we're about ready to go. So, like I say, as soon as what is going on here? As soon as you're ready, brother, I'm going to remove myself, and then you can go ahead and begin talking. And let me share your screen. Add it to the thing.
All
Okay.
right.
Just added it. Okay,
All
now
right.
I'm going to
Can you
go
see
ahead
my
and remove.
screen?
Yep. I can see it bright and clear. So I'm going to remove myself, and then as soon as you begin talking, then I'll start your time.
All right, let's get it. All right, so the brother said I wouldn't be able to show anything ethnically. All right, so let's end this debate right now, right? Was Alexander the Great an Illyrian? I told you, pay attention, KP. Pay attention. We know that the Macedonians, that the Illyrians were a tribe of Macedonians. Let's look at the Illyrians. The Illyrian tribe, right? Or Iapode or Iapod, right? We know that the I, the Y, the J is interchangeable, right? In Semitic language. It is actually the Semitic name of Japheth. The Illyrian tribe, Iapode, is actually the Semitic name for Japheth. So we know that the Illyrians had a distinct, direct lineage to Japheth. Japheth or Japheth, the Hebrew, the second son of Noah, is supposed to be the ancestor of the northern and western nations and of the Indo-European stocks. Illyrians equated Japheth with the Titan Japheth or Japheth, translated later into the Greek. This is the understanding of who these people were. This is why he's identified as a Macedonian. Macedonia as in the region that he came from. Illyrian as the ethnic tribe that he derived from, that we know derived from Japheth. So when he's talking about the Macedonians and Teman, he is not talking about the eponymous ancestor. He's talking about the actual regions of land that these people came from, that were named after eponymous ancestors. So don't let this brother confuse you when he says, well, why they're coming from Teman and why the Macedonians agree. They're talking about people who lived in those lands, calling themselves after the lands they lived in. That has nothing to do with their bloodline or ethnicity. It had nothing to do with their genotype. But we clearly see here that the Illyrian tribes, was Alexander the Great, has always been attributed from descending from, is a name equated, a tribe equated with the Japhetic line. Let's continue. Strabo, in his 7th book, mentions the cities of the Yapadios or the Yapodius. Melaton, likely Venetia, Jespoda, Arepium, Vitalia Prism, Momentium, Avendo. Other sources mention the city of Toponius, Ancus, Strabinica, and Circalio, Bivinium, Epidenium, the port of Tibulus in 55 to 19 BCE, sing to the brave Japodian soldiers. These are the descendants of Japheth. The Japodians bordered the Norikians and the Corinthians in the north and northeast. In the west, they bordered the Pannonians and the Dalmatians, or the Dalmate, the River Tellium, and marked the southern border of the Epodian lands. So we know that these is where these people hail from, right? We know that the descendants of Japheth or the Illyrians or the Albanian connection today. We see who these people are right now. You say I couldn't show it. Let's continue. Considering all accounts, the Iapodians or the descendants of Japheth, right, which we know who these people are, dwell in the territory near the shores of the Adriatic Sea, into the river Sava in the interior. This is where we know that the people of Macedonia hail from these regions. Internally, the Apostles were divided into two groups: Cisalpine and Transalpine. The river Colapine or Corinth Cooper served as a division line between these two internal groups. From these two groups, Appian singles out the Transalpine Ipodians, or the Japhetic people, Japhetic tribe, has a powerful and wild ethnos that had conquered Aquila 171 BCE and sacked the colony of Turkestan. These northerners preserved their independence even from the cities from the Sapellian Epodians fell under the Roman control, specifically the southern Sapellian Epodians. We know that these people of Japheth were still ruling in these areas and still very much active in these lands. This being the case, the inhabitants of Macedonia are descendants of the old Aryan Greek settlers. Watch this. The Macedonians clung to their old traditions. Prehistorical data are very clear on this point. Since the dawn of history, the names of the people and the places in Macedonia are Greek. These were the people I was just naming some of these lands: Karanos, Perdicaeus, Amentus, Aropus, Acladius, Cletos, Amethia, Idumea, Halakam, Achaeus, and Dion. These are historians. These are places. Some of these are named after historians, but these are places of people that we know that the Macedonians descended from the old Aryan Greek settlers. In addition, there is a tradition that the Greek dialect, the brother brought up the dialect, that the Greek dialect of the Macedonians is preserved, and rightly so. The old peculiarities of the Homeric times retaining the nominative cases of the first declination without S, as is the case of the Thessalian and the Boasian dialects such as Epotia, Remeta, and Olympic, and so on. Why do we see Olympica and these terms in there? These are Greek terms. Greek terms we see within the Macedonian dialect. So when the brother says they couldn't understand them, they needed an interpreter, they just spoke broken English. Like they tell us we speak Ebonics. We don't all speak the King's English, but we all speak English. That's all they're talking about. A dialect is just a different language in the terms of how something is spoken. It's just a different vernacular. This very thing is also denoted by the name Ptolemaeus, Homeric Ptolemaeus, while the Southerners were saying later Ptolemus or Polemon. It is not improper to mention here that the bodyguards of the kings of Macedonia were called Iteria of the king, that is, fellow warriors and companions, as in the time of Homer. We know that the Ptolemies were Greeks. We know they were descended from the Greeks. These people are Greeks. I don't understand why this brother's confused by this. He's confusing the people from being called something from a land versus their eponymous ancestor or an ancestor that they actually derive from. He's confusing the two. The Macedonian dialect was preserved in an undeveloped and archaic state, as was the case with their entire civilization, but it was Greek. Look it up, people. Macedonia.com /English/origin. They tell you that the origin of the Macedonian language and dialect was Greek. What is he saying here? This debate is over. It's over. Another example, Greeks from all over Greece had left their original hometowns and settled in colonies outside Greece. The latter however, has never been evacuated altogether by its Greek inhabitants. Thus, Macedonia too sent out her surplus population without ceasing to be a country of Greeks. They're telling you what their history are. The Macedonians were not Edomites. He brought out the book of Esther. I knew you were going to go here. Esther 6 and 10. Now that you will more plainly understand what we say, I, Amon, this is who he talked about, the son of Meditha, a Macedonian, both in mind, in his thoughts, and country where he lived, having nothing of the Persian blood, but with his cruelty staining of goodness was received, being a stranger by us. Talking about Esther, right? Here it says that Amos was referred to here as a Macedonian. Now, if you have the red book of the Apocrypha, you will find this note at the top of chapter 16, placed in the Greek after chapter 8 and 12 of the Hebrew. This lets us know that this book is translated from the Greek. It's also known as the Septuagint. There are many different versions of this, but we will get into that later.
Time.
Macedonians were not Greeks. Appreciate you.
Time. Man is rolling. All right, man. It seemed like every time I think Elder Yara pulls away, KP come back with some information. Then when I feel like KP's pulling away, Yara come back with some information, man. This is man, it's going down to the wire, man. And then now this is about the time that Sal likes the cross-examination part. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring both brothers in, man. It's been a great debate so far. Once again, you guys smash that like button. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out these brothers' descriptions in the box, in the description box. Also, we also have another brother who did our graphic design for the flyer. I think it's a very dope flyer. The brother's information is also down there, brother Darren Quam. You guys definitely go check him out if you need some any kind of graphics work design done. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into this 15-minute round. Let me go ahead and set up my timer here to 15 minutes. And then what we're going to do is this is going to be the cross-examination. Okay, so we're going to continue with the format. Brother KP is going to start off by asking Elder Yara some questions for the 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and meet you guys out right quick. He's going to start off with the questions for the first 15 minutes. And then as when he asks you a question, especially if it's a yes or no, please answer yes or no first, and then go into your explanation. Yes or no first, then the explanation. You'll have 2 minutes to ask a question. I'm sorry, you'll have 1 minute to ask the question, and you will be given 2 minutes to answer the question. Please don't try to drain out the time. Answer it as precisely and concisely as possible, so that we can get as many questions out as possible. And remember, this is for the benefit of the audience's edification. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open both of you brothers' mics up. And as soon as you ask your first question, Brother KP, I'm going to go ahead and start the time here. Let me get ready. Hold on. And then I'm going to back away and just let you brothers go at it. So as soon as you start asking the questions, I'm going to go ahead and start the time. Let me remove myself, and then it's on you guys.
Okay, it's on me.
Yeah, you have the first question, brother.
All right. Do you this is my first question. Do you have a genealogy list of Alexander that does not include mythological characters? And if so, what is the source and who does the ancestry begin with? That's the question.
Yes. Hold on. I can get you to his genealogy that does exist without mythological figures, because we do know that his mother, right, often tried to attribute his birth to mythological figures, but we do know who his biological father was, King Philip, and we do know who his mother was, and we do know that these were people who were descended from Japheth, a Jabonite. So let me get that information. Let me see if I can get to it really quickly. If you give me some time to answer that, because you asked me quite a few questions. Macedonia by Richard Gottheil, Gottheil, and Samuel Krauss, I'm sorry, Krauss. The country of Southern East Europe, now a part of the Turkish Empire. It is the native country of Alexander the Great, who is therefore called Alexander the Macedonia in rabbinical writings. The Macedonians are mentioned under the name Kittim and Eusebius, and Hebrew, and the Hebrew Josephus or Gorindus, which is a source. I should have just showed my screen. Noble, Knobel, page 103, uses the same designation. So we know that there is a genealogical connection, again, from him being a native, Alexander the Great being a native of southeastern Europe, which is now part of the Turkish Empire. And so we do know where he came from. We do know where his lineage of his people existed from.
Yeah, that wasn't a question.
Show my screen if anybody wants to see that source again.
All right, that wasn't the question. That wasn't the answer to the question, but what is the next question now? I guess yes. Second question, right?
Yep.
All right.
Keep rolling.
All right. In the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 9, and the book of Amos, chapter 1, verse 9, there's an identical prophecy uttered by both prophets, and they identify the Greeks and Edom as the same people. Why is that?
Can you read that scripture for me?
Joel chapter 3, verse 9. Hold on a second.
And I'm gonna pause your time while you pull the scripture up for you, so you don't waste your time there.
All right, Joel chapter 3, verse 9. It says, wait a minute. I'm sorry, Joel chapter 3, verse 6. It says, the children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians. And in Hebrew, that Grecian says Javan, that you might remove them far from their border. That's Joel chapter 3, verse 6. And in Amos chapter 1, verse 9, this is the same prophet that prophesied contemporary with Joel. He says, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyrus, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they delivered up the whole captivity to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. So this is the same judgment that was issued by the prophet Tyrus from Joel and Amos, who were contemporary. They prophesied at the same time in history. So my question is, why did they identify the Greeks and Edom as the same people? And keep in mind that the word Grecians is Javan in Hebrew.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question, and I think this is a great question, because I think this actually seals the debate for you, brother. Because what we see in Job, right, is that clearly, as you read, we clearly see, as I've been stating all night, that the Greeks are descended from Javan. Javan is clearly descended from Japheth, right? But when we get to the book of Amos, what is it that we see? We don't see the term Edomite. We don't even see the eponymous ancestor named Esau. What we do see is a naming of the land. And we do know that the Greeks, or the Javanites, right, ruled the land which was called Edom. They ruled in that land. There is nothing in the book of Amos that says these are Edomites or descendants of Esau. None. And there's no way if Amos and Job are prophesying at the same time, they're giving the same connection here. Are you saying Job is incorrect and Amos is incorrect? Or are you saying Amos is correct and Job is incorrect? This seals the deal, brother. I really appreciate this question. What you see in Amos is him talking about the land, and you've been doing this all night. And this is what I said. You're confusing the land versus the eponymous ancestors. It is not the same. You've done it with the land of Teman, and the Macedonians saying that they're from Teman because the Macedonians, they lived in that land. You did this with, you're doing the same thing here. The Greeks, the Javanites, clearly states in the verse that you read, was ruling in the land that is known as Edom.
Next question.
Does it make them Edomites?
Yeah, definitely next question, because that was I don't know what that was.
It's an answer. That's what it was.
Yeah, it's an answer, but not the answer to the question.
It's not
All
the
right,
answer you wanted.
Now, let's see here. Let me go back to what I was asking about Alexander the First. His forefather, Alexander the Great's forefather, Alexander the First, was called the Philhellene. What are your thoughts on that?
The Philhellene, spell that for me.
Phil, and then it's Hellene, Hellene. I mentioned earlier why he was called that. So I don't know if you were listening, but I'm asking your thoughts on why Alexander the First was called Philhellene by the Hellenic people.
If it's my understanding, if you study genetics, and I can really pull that up, the Philhellene, right? That has to have a connection to what we understand of Philistia or the Philistines, right?
No.
You disagree with that?
Yes, Philhellene does have nothing to do with the Philistines, brother.
How do you know
Phil is Phil. Well, because I know Greek. Phil means love in Greek. Hellene is talking about the Hellenic people. It has nothing to do with the Philistines. So Philhellene is a word that means lover of Greeks. Lover of the Greeks. And that was a name that the Hellenistic people only gave to foreigners and non-Hellenic people. So I'm asking you, why was Alexander the First called a Philhellene?
I mean, why was he called a Philhellene? I mean, you just gave the definition of Philhellene, right?
Right.
Are you saying Philhellenes were Edomites?
No, I'm saying what I said with the question, brother. I'm asking you, why did the Hellenic people call Alexander the First Philhellene? Philhellene means a non-Hellenic person.
Brother, do you understand what Hellenic means?
I explained it in my answer.
Hold on,
Hellenic people that referred to as Hellenistic were not native Greeks. Those were foreigners.
Elder Yara, try to refrain from asking questions.
Okay, those were foreigners, right? Who had
you said Hellenic were foreigners?
Yeah, most people Hellenists were foreigners. Yes, they were foreigners who had adopted or taken on the Greek culture. They often spoke the lingua franca, which was Greek. So they were called Hellenes. And so these people, and so you're talking about why Alexander was called the lover of the Hellenes. And that's the reason why, because we know, and you read it earlier, he was known to be benevolent towards foreign people. That's how they ruled. And the Romans actually adopted that practice to a degree, making them not giving up their gods, letting them practice their deities, keeping their worship as they were, but as long as they paid taxes and didn't do any uprisings or anything like that. So he was known to be philanthropic towards these people. So he was known as a lover of Hellenes. And we see this in the Bible. We see there are Greeks and we see there are Jews who were called Hellenes. If you go to the book of Acts, we clearly see this. Acts chapter 6 clearly tells you this. We know who these people were. And so, actually, if you really go back and really do a connection, which is why I brought up the term Philistine, right? You gotta really break it up and understand who these were, because we know genetically that the Philistines were of Greek origin.
Next question.
All right. On the walls of the tomb of Rekhmire in Egypt, there's a painted scene of Minoans, who were a Japhetic people. They were bringing tribute to the pharaoh, and it's dated to the 15th century BC. And they're depicted as Negroid. And there's numerous busts and statues and coins from ancient Greece up until the 4th century BC that clearly depicts the inhabitants as Black people. So was Alexander Negroid or Caucasoid?
You said, was he Negroid?
Yeah, Negroid or Caucasoid.
Or Caucasoid? On the walls, on the tombs of Rekhmire, right? Right. Since you want to go to phenotypes, on the tomb of Rekhmire, what you see, or the B'nai Hassan tomb, that's the B'nai Hassan mural is what you're referring to, correct?
No,
You're not referring to the B'nai Hassan mural?
no, it's on the tomb of Rekba in Egypt. No,
Let's
I mean
see.
it's a Japheth. I don't know if you have time to look it up. It's a group of people bringing tribute to the pharaoh at the time. They're
Let's look
referred
at
to
it.
as Kefti, which is Japhetic.
They were referred to as who?
Kefti, the Kefti, Kefti, which means Japhetic. And
Yeah, Kefti, which means correct. Kefti, which means Japhetic. So I'm just trying to get your understanding here, because you're saying that these were dark melanated people that somehow the descendants of Javan could not have been a Caucasoid looking people. Is that what you're saying?
No, my question was Alexander the Great, was he Negroid or was he Caucasoid? And by, you know what Negroid and Caucasoid means? What I mean by that? The Negroid, I
Well,
mean
not
like black.
necessarily so, because Caucasoid could simply mean, well, actually what it means is actually those who have descended from the Caucasus Mountain region.
No, that's Caucasian. I'm not.
But if you're talking about phenotypes, there's no way you can determine anyone by skin color. Is that what you're doing, brother?
No, I'm asking a question that you're not answering, brother.
No, I'm asking you a question. Are you using it in terms of skin color, skin type? Is that your question? Because if he's Caucasoid, I can say yes, because we know that the descendants of Japheth, some of them did rule and come from that area, from the Caucasus Mountain region.
Phenotypically.
Oh, so you are talking about skin color. Thank you. That's what I asked. So for clarification, you can't determine one's race by skin color, can you?
I didn't ask you that, brother.
I gave my answer.
I've asked like 4 questions so far, and you're going all over the place, man. I didn't ask you any of them.
I'm not going all over the place. I'm telling you, there is no way you can determine one's race by phenotype.
I didn't ask. I didn't say that.
That's my answer.
I yield.
You should.
Yeah, yield my time.
Okay.
No, it doesn't make sense. No more questions. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I don't see how one could try to determine.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Great question and answer. Great question and answer. You had a few minutes left over, but I think you did a pretty good job, and it was a pretty good job answering the questions. I didn't get too out of hand, and I appreciate that. We're going to move on to the brother Yara now, and it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be another 15 minutes, and 2 minutes. You're gonna hear the gavel, and then the ring, just like you heard, ended around. And brother KP, I'm going to repeat. Please try to answer yes or no first on a yes or no question, and then go into your explanation. You'll have 2 minutes to answer. Elder Yara, you'll have 1 minute to ask the question. Please do not try to burn up the time, so you could get as many questions out as possible, so we all can be edified in the room. Once again, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and check out these brothers' information in the description box. Elder Yara, it'll begin the time as soon as you start talking. Let me go ahead and unmute your mics, and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. You brought up the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, chapter 3, verse 1, I'll read it if you don't have it, if you want to get some time to read it. From the book of Esther that you were reading from, it states this: and after this, King Artaxerxes highly honored Haman, which you brought up earlier in the debate, son of Amadeus the Bugian, and exalted him and set his seat above all his friends. Right? There's a term there, the Bugian, or the Bugaean, some spell it. Do you know what that term means, or what that was alluding to?
No. From what I'm reading here, when I read Esther 3, verse 1 in the Hebrew, the word Bugian does not appear. It refers to Agagite or Agag, which was a descendant of Amalek, the Edomites. I don't see anything about any Bugian in the manuscript of the
Apocrypha of Esther, didn't you?
Well, you said Esther 3, verse 1. Is that what you refer to?
The Apocrypha. You read from the Apocrypha, understand? You read from the Apocrypha earlier in your debate.
No, I mentioned Esther 16, verse 10, but you're saying Esther 3, verse 1. That's not the Apocrypha.
Did you read from the Apocrypha?
I just said, I mentioned Esther 16, verse 10 from the Apocrypha, but what you just read was Esther 3, verse 1.
Right, I read Esther 3, verse 1 from the Septuagint. I'm sorry. From the Septuagint.
Okay,
Right.
and what I'm saying in the original language, in the source language of Esther, which is Hebrew, there's nothing there that says anything about Bougion. It talks
I
about
didn't ask you
Agag.
about that. I asked you what the Septuagint says.
And I said, no, I don't see anything about Bougion because I don't read the Septuagint.
Are
I'm
you
looking at
reading the
different
Septuagint?
No, I'm not, sir.
Okay, so then how would you know if it's
Elder
not there?
Yara, hey, let me cut in for a minute. Elder Yara, let him get his answer out. He has about 2 minutes. Just let him get his answer out.
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir.
Well, my answer is Esther 3, verse 1. I don't see anything about Bougion in that text. You're reading from the Septuagint. I'm not. So,
Okay, well, I'm reading from the Septuagint.
What is your point you're making about Bougion?
Yeah, I'm reading from the Septuagint because in the Septuagint of the book of Esther, right, which is probably whatever book you got from came from this translation, right? So this Septuagint is older than the translation you're reading from. So in the Septuagint, Esther chapter 3, verse 1, it talks about the Bougion. That's what it refers to him as, right? It refers to him as that. You said you didn't know what that means, right? So the origin of the word means scorn, right? And in the latter Greek editions, it's been replaced. It was replaced with the word Macedonian. Do you have any connections, right? Direct lineage showing that the Macedonians are descended from Esau?
Yes. I mentioned it earlier in my statement. I mentioned it earlier in my statements, and I mentioned it earlier in my statements, and I gave the reference to the Persian scholar al-Biruni from 1,000 years ago, who had a genealogical list of Alexander that went back to Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. Would you like me to quote the book again?
Actually, no. I just really wanted you to bring that. No, I just wanted you to bring that back out and give us the date on that, just going back to 1,000 years ago. Because that brings me to my next question. Are you familiar with Rabbi Avi Akiva?
No.
I'm sorry, A-K-I-V-A.
No.
Okay. Are the Greeks related to the Romans?
It depends what you mean by that.
Are they related to the
Greeks
Romans?
are you talking about? Which Romans are you talking about?
Are the Greeks related to the Romans?
All right. Again, it depends who you're talking about, because when you talk about Greeks like yourself, you may be referring to the people that are calling themselves Greeks, or referring to the people who are actual descendants of Japheth, who are the indigenous Greeks, or the Romans that call themselves Romans, or the Etruscans, where the original.
All Greeks, not Hellenists. Or not Hellenists. I'm not talking about Hellenists. I'm talking about Greeks, those descended from Japheth.
The descendants of Japheth that call themselves Greeks were considered Javon. I'm answering your question, brother. The descendants of Japheth that were called Greeks, Grecians, or Greeks were Javon. The original descendants of the people that call themselves Romans were Kittim. They were also descendants of Japheth.
So then your answer would be yes, they are related.
If we're talking about the actual seed and lineage of Japheth, yes, the Greeks and the Romans are the same people.
So they are related, right? So if the Romans are related to the Greeks, right, according to Genesis chapter 10, verses 1 through 5, right, then how is it that you claim that the lineage of Esau is connected to the descendants of the Romans and the Greeks from Japheth?
I never said that.
That's what you're implying.
You can't tell me what I'm implying when I didn't say anything, brother.
If that's absolutely
I
what you
said
said,
nothing of the sort.
if you said that they're Greek, you said that the Greeks, you said that they're Greeks, specifically Alexander the Great, that I've proven tonight is ethnically Greek, was descended from Japheth. Then how does he become, in your understanding, connected biologically to the lineage of Esau?
Well, I'll repeat for the 5th time. I mentioned a genealogical list that has stood for 1,000 years, connecting Alexander back to Esau, number 1. Number 2, I mentioned earlier how the Macedonians were connected to Esau.
Let him get it out, Yara. Let him get it out.
No, he doesn't want me to get it out because it's going to cut his whole gene. It's going to cut his argument in half. That's why
I can't hear. I got a little bit of a delay, I think.
Oh, you got a delay? Okay.
Just a little bit.
All right.
I'm like a half a second behind him.
Go ahead, KP. You got about 2 minutes.
Well, he's asking me again about the book, The Chronology of Ancient Nations. It's on page 48 and 49. It's by an author named Sakchow. And this genealogy from Al-Biruni is from 1,000 years ago. And there's no refuting this genealogy list unless you have something to refute it with. And I asked you if you have a genealogical list. You said no. You basically said you don't have one. So this goes back to Esau.
I absolutely answered that.
Hold on, Elder. Let him get it out first, and then you could come back and then go into it. Go ahead, finish up, KP. You got about a minute left.
All right, if I can actually get there. The Macedonians had many towns. There are towns and districts in Macedonia named after the Edomites, eponymously. They used the patronym of Timenidae. And again, this genealogical list traces Alexander all the way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Esau, and Eliphaz. And Eliphaz had a son named Teman, as we all know. This is where I'm getting the information from. Now you're saying that you're asking me how is he Japheth and Esau? He's not Japheth. That's your argument, and you haven't proved that actually. So I'm not saying he's Japheth and Esau. I'm saying he's Esau.
Go ahead, Elder.
All right. So again, clearly, let me show you where your author got his information from. Right. He got it from a Rabbi Akiva, because no one makes this claim before Rabbi Akiva. Nobody makes it, right? So in the story of the Jewish people being a history of Jewish people, and I'm going to get to a question. Rabbi Akiva states the Edomites are the Romans. Why asked Turnus Rufus of Rabbi Akiva on subsequent occasion, have we incurred the hatred of your God so that he says, I hate Esau? The Romans were said to be the descendants of Esau. There are a few things wrong with that idea, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to get to a question. Right. It is known throughout history that the Jewish rabbis constantly replaced the name of Rome with Esau and the name of Esau with Rome, not because of biological reasons, but because of political reasons. Right. And any book written after that time or written never disproves or never argues against Rabbi Akiva. That's been definitely proven. There's no connection between the Greeks and Esau and the Romans biologically. Even when we get to Alexander the Great, again, we're talking about he is a Illyrian. He's quoted and is stated by all historians, Strabo and the like, that the Illyrians were a tribe of Japheth. Do you argue against the fact that Alexander the Great was considered an Illyrian?
Well, I wouldn't argue against that fact if he resided or was a citizen of the region of Illyria. Therefore, he's an Illyrian, just like it says in the scriptures that Jacob was an Aramaean, but he wasn't an Aramaean ethnically. He lived there. So no, I do not deny that he was an Illyrian, but it has nothing to do with his ethnic background. It has to do with his status as a citizen of that region.
Do you have proof of that? Because I read a source earlier stating that he was natively born as an Illyrian. And because he was an Illyrian, which we know there was a Japhetic tribe of Illyrians that he is hailed from. So again
land.
from the yes, absolutely. Would you like for me to read that source back to you?
No, I was saying that lands don't name people, people name lands. So if he's called an
Okay,
Illyrian, it has
again,
nothing to do with this ethnic background because there's no such thing as an Illyrian ethnically. Anybody can be an Illyrian if they live in Illyria.
see, this is again, you misunderstand what I'm saying. The Illyrians were a tribe of Japhetic people. And this is what you've been doing all night. Simply because, let me put it to you like this. This is exactly what you're doing. And you let me know if I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, because this is in the formulated of a question. If I take a zebra from the continent of Africa and place him in Canada, does that zebra become a Canadian zebra?
Absolutely not. Just the same way you take a Macedonian and put him in Greece, it doesn't make him Greek.
Okay, so we know that the Macedonians and the Greeks always said that the Macedonians were Greeks. They were just barbarians. In other words, they weren't less civilized, but they always agreed that they were Greeks. And I've shown and proven that tonight. So you keep saying that the Macedonians weren't Greeks, but history proves you wrong. Do you not deny that historians say that the Macedonians were Greeks? Is that
The
not a fact of
Macedonians were
history?
Greeks by the Macedonians were Greeks by status, not ethnicity.
They had no status. I proved that to you tonight. That was their whole argument. They were thought of less than because they were not as refined and classical as the Central Greeks, as you quoted, as you talked about earlier, the Greeks that lived in the central area of Greece. The Macedonians lived on the outskirts, and they were considered more uncouth. But they were still considered Greeks. Do you not deny the fact that the Macedonians participated in the Olympic Games?
They participated in the Olympic Games after Alexander I was allowed to participate in the Olympic Games because he gave information that he was, quote unquote, an Argive. So they allowed him to participate. And then from then on, his descendants were allowed to participate. But the Macedonians, they also had their own Olympic Games. But the Macedonians had their own Olympic Games that they set up because they were denied entry to the Olympic Games by the indigenous Greeks, who said that it was only supposed to be for Greeks, not barbarians, not foreigners.
Okay, they never called them. They never called the Macedonians foreigners. What they're saying is the only reason why Alexander I was allowed to participate in the Olympic Games is because it was ruled by the Helikodykia, and I showed that the Greeks themselves that they can prove their Greek genealogy going back to the Agite dynasty, which where we know Alexander the Great came from. So how are you trying to split hairs on that? They would not have been allowed. The Macedonians for generations had participated before Alexander I. They had participated in the Olympic Games for generations.
That's not true.
Should I read the source? Do you have a source to prove that? Because I have a source that disproves what you're saying. Should I go back and read it for you?
Yeah, that's not true. Alexander I was called Phil-Hellene, which you erroneously said it had something to do with the Philistines because you don't know what the word means. They called him Phil-Hellene because he was not Hellene. He was not part of the 4 tribes that divided themselves into different tribes and called themselves Hellene. I didn't say Hellenistic. I didn't say Hellenist. I said they were not Hellene, meaning they were not descendants of the man Helen, where the Greeks get their progeny from. That's what I said. No one before Alexander I attempted to get into the Olympics or participate in the Olympics. He was the first one to attempt it. He was denied, but then they allowed him to later on. And they called him Phil-Hellene, which means not Hellene.
Again, you're using the term Phil-Hellene as if Hellene doesn't also include people who are not Greeks. And I showed that. I'm telling you that there were many people who were not called Greeks, who were called Hellenes because the Greeks conquered their nations. That's why these people were called Hellenes. I don't understand why you're trying to make that fabrication.
Time. Okay. Man. Some good information coming out, man, and some good questions, some good answers, man. I don't know what to think right now. I gotta hit the lab and go figure this stuff out, man. I'm glad I'm taking some good notes. I hope everybody out there is taking some notes as well. Like I say, be sure to check these brothers' descriptions out in the description box, and give these brothers a follow, because there's a lot of good information coming out tonight. Anyway, um, make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe this. Let's get this information out to everybody else out there. And thank you guys for joining along with us. Let me give a couple shout outs before we go into our 5-minute closing rounds for both brothers. Let's see here. Let's go to the comments. Let's see. We got Watchman 44. Peace to you. The brother Sahih Luke. Peace to you. The brother B'nai Yeshurun. Peace to you. I am Manna. Peace to you, sis. Of course, Israelite intelligentsia on the stage. Brother Yasin, peace to you. The brother Bleedo, peace to you. Ayaban Haya Nabaya, peace to you. Bleedo, peace to you. The brother Lou, peace to you. Peace to everybody that's joining in with us. Don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe. At this time, we're gonna shut this down. I'm gonna remove Brother Elder Yara from the screen, and we're gonna let the brother KP give his 5-minute closing here. Let me see. Let me set the time to 5 minutes, and I'll let you go ahead and get that, brother. Okay, it's all set up. So as soon as you start talking, I'm going to remove myself. And as soon as you start talking, I'll start your time, brother. 5-minute closing. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. In closing, Brother Yara has displayed his failure to definitively connect Alexander the Great ethnically to the children of Japheth, who were called Greeks. In contrast, I have presented an abundance of testimony from various reputable Greek and Roman historians and scholars that all confirm that Alexander's people, the Macedonians, were ethnically distinct from the Greek people that they conquered and colonized. In the words of Aristotle, who was Alexander's personal teacher, he, and I quote, he classed the Macedonians and their institution of monarchy as not Greek. The Macedonians considered themselves to be separate from the Greeks, and they were proud to be so, end quote. And you can find that statement in the book titled The Macedonian State by Hammond. So there are way too many examples of distinctions between the Macedonians and the Greeks to believe that Alexander the Macedonian shared common ancestry with Japhetic tribes, just because his people assigned the names of the people they assimilated with to themselves. And even still, the ancient testimonies that I presented may not have been any more or less relevant than Brother Yara's sources. But if the celebrated historians that I've mentioned, such as Herodotus, Plutarch, Aristotle, Demosthenes, Appian, etc., they're all saying the same thing, but Brother Yara's Greco-Roman sources seem to be saying otherwise, then the next logical step would be to hear from a non-Greek or non-Roman witness that doesn't have any ulterior motive to lie. And that would be the information that I presented from the Persian historian al-Burundi, who possessed an undisputed genealogy that has stood for over 1,000 years. And Brother Yara mentioned some rabbi that has absolutely nothing to do with this. I don't know what that has to do with any of this. But al-Burundi, his genealogy that he presented calls for the question to become, which of the Greco-Roman testimonies concerning Macedonian ethnic makeup matches al-Burundi's genealogical list? So it's very obvious that all roads lead to a non-Japhetic background for Alexander, but instead a Shemitic background, and specifically an Edomite background. It's completely ridiculous to subscribe to any genealogy list that includes Heracles, the son of Zeus, as an ancestor. Alexander was an actual man, just like the ancient pharaohs used to, advertise themselves as physical descendants of the false gods of Kemet, Alexander did the same thing to try and evoke fear and reverence from the people that he subjugated. But realistically speaking, any pedigree of Alexander can only be taken seriously if it consists of actual human beings. And the pedigree that I presented, which links Alexander with his forefather Esau and his forefather Teman, can't be refuted, as shown by Brother Yarah's inability to do so. So is that my time? I heard the gavel. Is that my time?
No, 2-minute warning.
Okay.
2-minute
So
warning.
I'm going to leave the listeners with this closing thought. If we're going to be scholars, right? If we're going to be scholastic, let's be scholarly. Okay. If Alexander himself made a distinction between the Macedonians and the Japhetic tribes he conquered, it's anti-scholarly to call him Japheth. If the historians and the scholars that were contemporary with Alexander or after Alexander unanimously agreed that the Macedonians were not related to the Japhetic tribes of Greece, it's anti-scholarly to hang your hat on confirmation bias info you scrounge up off the internet. If we have artifacts and archaeology and coinage and paintings that all depict the pre-Macedonian indigenous people of Greece as phenotypically Black, and then the same type of depictions switch to an entirely different phenotype after Alexander and his people assumed power, it's anti-scholarly to reject common sense and ignorantly label these phenotypically distinct people as kinsmen. That's ridiculous. However, if scholarship reveals that Alexander's people used an obvious Edomite patronym like Teman, and that they eponymously named towns and cities of Macedonia after Edom, and that Alexander's preserved pedigree literally traces him to Esau, father of the Edomites, then it's scholarly to conclude that Alexander was an Edomite. That's common sense. So I want to thank y'all for your time, and I yield the floor.
Okay, brother KP. Great debate. A lot of good information to consider. Yeah, man, that was a powerful performance. At this time, we're going to bring in Elder Yara for his 5-minute closing. Let's go ahead and bring the brother back on the screen. Elder Yara, this is your 5-minute closing. Man, it's been a wonderful debate so far. After this, guys, we're going to go ahead and do the question and answer from the audience. So you guys get your questions ready and be ready to come up on the stage. But at this time, we're going to do Elder Yara's 5-minute closing round. Elder Yara, as soon as you begin, I will start your time, and it's on you, brother.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to share my screen just to show something really quickly. Just in my closing.
Okay, it's up there.
It's up there.
Yep.
Right, let me see if I can make it bigger. Right here. Right. The brother all night, man, has been mix and matching historical facts and figures, saying things that wholly are not true, give me a lot of conjecture. I dare anybody to go back and look at, he brought up Al-Burundi, Muslim scholar that we know has no credibility in that genealogy. Go back and look at it. But he clearly says Herodotus never makes the claim. It's one of the historians he brought up. So he talks about historians that we really have to look at to consider. So Alexander was a Macedonian. Macedonians were great people. This is what Herodotus says in his histories, book 5, chapter 22, section 1, verse 1. Now that these descendants of Perdiccas, i.e. the Macedonians, are Greeks, as they themselves say, I myself chance to know and will prove it in the latter part of my history. So we have Herodotus saying that the Macedonians are Greeks. And a brother keeps trying to say, oh, simply because they lived in the land of Macedonia didn't make them Greeks. I agree with that. But he keeps saying historically that the Macedonians aren't Greek. But Alexander the Great, we know, is a Macedonian, ethnically an Illyrian. We know that the Illyrians were the tribe of Japheth. Right? He keeps saying here, Alexander the Great. He was a member of the Argyle royal dynasty that originated from the Peloponnesian city of Argos, hence their names. To be more accurate than those of who already responded, he was half Macedonian on his father's side and half Malaysian on his mother's side. The Malaysians were undoubtedly Greek. The Macedonians, as pointed out by various archaeological artifacts, were also Greek and most likely of a Doric stock. Look at the Argyle rulers from 805 BCE to 323 BCE. This is a history of Greek people, of a lineage. He says I didn't have, right? We talked about this. I showed this actual slide. The country of Southern Eastern Europe, now a part of Turkish Empire, is the native country of Alexander the Great, who is therefore called Alexander the Macedonian in rabbinical writings. So we know undoubtedly he's a Greek. We know he's a Macedonian. No one in history doubted this but this brother. Nobody doubts that. The first book of Maccabees also talks about, which was originally written in Hebrew, also uses the word Kittim for the Macedonians. It mentions Philip and Alexander, as well as Philip III and his illegitimate son Perseus, as kings of Macedonia. We know since the Greek Syrians styled themselves successors of Alexander, these Syrians also are called Macedonians. These people are Greek. I don't know what this brother is attempting to do. I just don't understand it. Right? It says Macedonia represented the eschatological kingdom. With them, the expression of Javan is interchangeable with Macedonia. They mention probably a figurative sense the jaundice of Macedonia, also the gold from the same country. We know that these people are connected. The Greeks. I bought out Mary Beard, historian on Alexander the Great, Alexander the Great's family participating in the Olympic Games. You couldn't do it if you weren't able to prove that you were a Greek. He already agreed Alexander I was allowed to participate in the Olympic Games based on his roots in the Greek Argive dynasty. You can't dismiss that because you feel like it. It's history. They proved they were Greeks by participating in the Olympic Games. We can go on and on and on. So much information. All he's presented is conjecture tonight. But I appreciate you, Brother Vinny, for this time and hosting this debate, man. KP for showing up, man. I appreciate you, man, and the information you brought. And shout out to SHOUTOUT, man, for allowing us again to use his illustrious platform. Peace to the brother. Donate to SHOUTOUT, man. Donate to Debate Talk for You. Peace.
Woo, man. Great debate, guys. Great debate, fellas. Man, I'm telling you, I feel like Ric Flair out here. But anyway, man, if y'all appreciated that debate, man, make sure y'all show these brothers some love. Tap into their channels, their YouTube, their Facebook. Tap into these brothers' channels. Brother KP, I do have another question for you. What is the name of that your website again, brother? Because we definitely want to plug that. You're doing some good work out there, sounds like.
Yeah, it's houseoftobit.com. And it's under construction right now, but that's the website. Once it's set up, you can see what we got going on as far as what we do for the community in the tri-state area. And I can be reached at houseoftobit@gmail.com.
Okay, we'll make sure to put that into the description. And once again, the brother Elder Yara's information is Israelite Intelligentsia Podcast at on YouTube. Israelite Intelligentsia Podcast on YouTube. Also Elder Yara, self-explanatory on YouTube, and then also the name Yarah Ben Nazr on Facebook, and also KP Barnabas on Facebook as well. Yeah, we appreciate you brothers, both you brothers, for bringing that powerful information. It was a great debate, man. I have to say, man. You know, I'm having a hard time. I have to really go back and then think about, all the information that both you brothers brought out, because it was power packed. It was power packed, you know, and we definitely appreciate that on behalf of South Showtime and the whole debate talk for you family. And of course, anytime you brothers would like to come back, whether it's presenting a lesson or whether doing a debate, just tap in, man. Our home is your home. You know what I mean? All information is good information. Everybody can go back and check it out. And yeah, we definitely appreciate you, brothers. We'd also like to appreciate everybody in the chat as well. And we'd also like to start with this gratification by letting you guys up here to ask any one of these two brothers a question if you had anything in mind. Let me go ahead and put this link in the chat here so you guys can come on up and ask your questions if you have any. Shout out to the brother John Williams, late coming in. I'm just now seeing it. Shout out to you, brother. Thanks for your participation. Okay, so let me go ahead and post this into the chat here. Let's post it into the chat. Boom. Okay. So the link is in the chat, guys. If anybody would like to come up and speak to these brothers, come on up. Link is in the chat. Link is in the chat. Yeah. Uh, Shout out to Wide Body Swift. Shout out to Wide Body Swift. Thanks for joining us. Um, Link is in the chat, guys. If anybody has any questions, any statements, want to congratulate the brothers on anything, link up with one of the brothers on building something, just let us know. Come on up, join us. We'll leave the link open for a little bit longer. With that being said, shout out to South Showtime. Um, let's go ahead and put this up. If you guys would love to help support South Showtime's platform at Debate Talk for You, you can cash app him at money sign South Showtime, or you could do the PayPal debate talk for you at gmail.com. Once again, that's the Cash App, money sign, Sal Showtime, all lowercase, or PayPal, Debate Talk for You, all one word with the number 4, not spelling out the 4, you at gmail.com. Okay. Anybody coming on up here? Come on up. And no sweat, wide body. No sweat, wide body. We definitely appreciate you joining in. Just make sure when you come on in, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, check the link out in the description box. We got a couple of goodies in there for you. In Israelite Intelligentsia podcast on YouTube, and also the brother KP's website, houseoftobit.com, which is under construction. Where he goes out and he does his part and help trying to build up the community. Well, it doesn't look like anybody's come on up. I personally I think it was so much information, man. That's it's a lot to go back on and research. It's a lot of good points here. But anyway, I guess if nobody's going to come up, I guess we can go ahead and close this thing on out. Once again, Elder Yara, I'll let the brother KP say his piece. Come on in, Elder Yara, and tell us about your platforms again. I know they're in the description box, but come on in and share with us again.
Yeah, again, I appreciate you, brother Vinny, man, for this time, man, for taking the time out, man, and hosting this thing, man, and promoting it and putting it together. It started out just a discussion going back and forth with the brother KP, man, on social media, and we just thought there was enough information here to have a debate or a really good discussion. Um, so again, my platform is, you see, is Israelite Intelligentsia Podcast. Find it on YouTube. Also, Elder Yara on YouTube. You'll see a plethora of debates and lessons and teachings on there. Please come and like, share, subscribe. You'll see a lot of information. I do a lot of biblical talks and debates about subjects people don't really delve into. You don't really hear about. One thing I really appreciated about this debate is that you don't often really hear this type of discussion when it comes to um, dealing with the biblical narrative and how extra biblical sources in history does play a role in what we see and what we deal with, especially those who come from a biblical background. You rarely see the secular information brought in. So again, I appreciate that. I appreciate Brother KP for again showing up for the debate and agreeing to have the debate. So again, man, I appreciate, man, everybody that tuned in. Hopefully they got some good information out of it, man. And man, I hope to see y'all again, man. Again, shout out to South Showtime, man.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I would like to end it on a good note with you fellas, man. I will just one question for both of you brothers. I'll start off with you, Elder Yara, since Brother KP's been going first all night. Um, what would you say that his strongest point that he brought out that you felt was his strongest point in his presentation?
To be honest with you, actually none. Because
Yeah.
there's just no way you can connect Alexander the Great. And when you actually go into Baruni's genealogy, he deals with Alexander. He deals with Alexander, um, the Great's genealogy in a way that is very suspicious. The reason why nobody argues against it is because nobody believes it. No one even promotes it. I'm sure that's even the first time anyone on this panel, on this audience, even ever heard of Al-Biruni. It's not a matter. It doesn't mean it's true because no one argued against it. It's fallacious. So why take the time to do it? It's like somebody studying Spider-Man comic book to see if Spider-Man was true, is real. We know it's a comic book. And so that's how people look at Al-Biruni's genealogy. It's false.
Okay, that kind of backfired. I was trying to get you to say something positive about the presentation, but okay. Anyway,
I
Brother
mean,
K.
he spoke eloquently.
All right, and Brother KP, same question to you. What do you think the most powerful point that he made in his presentation?
Well, I think his most powerful points, or his most, I guess, powerful aspect of his conversation is that he has a lot of circular arguments. I don't think that's positive, but his arguments are very circular in reasoning. Like he tries to prove his point with his point. So it's kind of it's a little bit futile to try to debate somebody that has that type of understanding or that school of thought. So there's a lot to get through. We haven't really gotten to the surface. I mean, below the surface actually. And again, the genealogy of Al-Biruni. I'm just going to say this. It's not that people don't want to debate it because it's not true. It's actually it should be the opposite. If somebody believes that something is not true or something is spurious or it's false, you have a whole bunch of people attacking it, a whole bunch of people giving their opinions as to why it's false, and but you don't see that not because nobody knows about it. It's been out there for 1,000 years. You don't know about it, so you can speak for yourself. But there's many people that know about this genealogy list. And if you're on the internet and in these social media platforms and whatnot, most of the people in these platforms don't know that much to begin with. So this is something that's been out there, and I urge the listeners, the listening audience, to go and get the book yourself. You can get the PDF version of it and download it. It's called The Chronology of Ancient Nations by an author named Satchal. He's not a crock. He's not spurious. He's not pseudo. The information in the book is 100% legit. So you can go look it up yourselves. And that's pretty much it, man. I want to thank you for allowing me again to be on the platform and have this dialogue. I didn't mention earlier that I'm also an author. I have 2 books that are on the market and a few more coming down the pipe. The first book is called From the Opposite Side of Kush, dealing with the diaspora of the Israelites from East Africa, from the Mediterranean, from East Africa to the West Coast of Africa, dealing with the diaspora along the way. And another book called From the Land of Milk and Honey to Wood and Water, about the Israelite presence in Jamaica. These 2 books are available on Amazon.com under the name KP Barnabas. So once again, I thank you guys for the opportunity. If you celebrate the Sabbath, Shabbat Shalom. And I pray that this dialogue was edifying to the listeners and to Brother Yara as well, because he needs edification. Just a friendly jab.
You got one in. You let him get one in. You let him get one in, Minnie.
I know.
I'm gonna let him
Hey,
take the last shot. I'm gonna let him take the last shot.
Hey, that's all good, man. Just we all family, man, and this is nothing but information, man. And y'all both brought it. I feel y'all both brought it, and y'all did a great job. And y'all always welcome back to the Debate Talk for You platform, because you guys are family now. So just reach out, man. Like I said, everybody in the chat, man, thanks for participating. We love you guys. Debate Talk for You family. Until next time, man. We will see you then. Shalom, shalom, guys. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
All right.
shalom.
Shalom.
All right.